What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Hard Work Beats Talent, where we aim to draw upon the insights of our inner circle in order to help our listeners make more informed decisions about their career and life journeys. I'm Nikita, and I'm joined, as always, by my good friend and co-host, Alex. And before we get into it, if we could just ask you, please, to subscribe, follow, like, and comment. Our handle is Hard Work Beats Talent Podcast across social media platforms, your listening platforms for podcasts such as YouTube, Spotify, Apple, and Google. We'd really appreciate it. And with that, on today's episode, we are joined by a good friend and member of our inner circle, Sam Johnson. Welcome to the show, Sam. How are you?
Very well, Nick. How you doing?
Yeah, doing really well. Thanks for joining us today. We're super excited to have such a superstar such as yourself on the show. So really grateful for you coming on. To kick us off, do you want to give our listeners a bit of a background into who you are, where you're from, and what you do? A bit like Cilla Black.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm Sam Johnson. Thank you very much for having me. I'm a singer-songwriter originally from Shropshire. I now live in London, neighbours with Nick. And I've been writing songs for quite some time, since it's about 14 or so. And maybe in the last 5 or 6 years, taking it kind of professionally. That's kind of the very rough summary, but that's what I do.
Well, I think I can speak for both of us when I say we're very blessed to have our first musician on the podcast. So no, thank you again for joining us, Sam. So for ours and the listeners' benefits, would you mind just giving us a bit of an overview as to like your early career and how you ended up getting into singing and songwriting?
Absolutely, yeah. So it's always hard to know exactly where to start with something that's kind of creative like that, especially when you're writing songs. But I guess it starts with those kind of early memories of music, which would be, I don't have a traditionally kind of very musically driven household. I've got like a creative household. My dad was an architect. My mum was a nurse, but like her brothers were involved in they were both actors and stuff. So I grew up in a kind of creative environment, I guess. And soon that it started, I guess, as like wanting to follow my uncle's footsteps and being like an actor, and I started doing Stagecoach and all that shit where you're learning to perform and sing and stuff. But then quite soon into my teens, I basically picked up a guitar. I think my mate Connor was playing like a Chili Peppers riff.
Nice.
Just out of pure kind of competitiveness, I was like, I have to be able to do that as well. And then I picked up a guitar and I was like, this is amazing. And you just fall into this world. That was quite early doors at 14. And quickly I realised actually I didn't want to learn other people's stuff. It was like ideas would come in and I started writing songs. So it all started there with writing, really. And then my voice kind of was only a kind of vessels to facilitate like singing people my songs. I couldn't show them it otherwise. So where my voice was 10 years ago is vastly different to where I am now. I wasn't that kind of guy with a hairbrush singing in the mirror, you know what I mean? It was always kind of driven by the songs, but that was very early doors. And then I guess we'll get into it more, but it got to a point where I had a certain amount. A family member, very fortunately, basically my uncle married a lady that was involved in the music industry, and she kind of took me under her wing a bit, and she was like, I was only like 15, 16, she's like, we should at least record some demos of your stuff. Did that when I was that old. And
can I just pause there just for a moment and just ask then, so it sounds like you had a pretty natural talent from a young age, and it was recognized by people around you. And so is it quite important, do you think, to kind of have that in your immediate network to kind of, recognize your natural talent and help nurture that from a young age?
I think you are, as an artist, you're really lucky if you've got that. And I certainly was. My immediate family never had that. It was by pure chance that my uncle married someone that was already working in the industry. I wouldn't say it's necessary, there's so many people that manage to break through without that, because whether it's your aunt or the bloke that's randomly sitting in the back of the pub that hears you, you find a way, if you're half decent and you put yourself in front of people in a room for someone to finally like mentor you a bit, you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
I suppose I was just lucky that that happened kind of from a family thing, but I don't think it's necessary, you know.
Okay, sweet.
And just to be clear, am I right in thinking that you were self-taught with the guitar, or did you get lessons?
Yeah. Self-taught. As I said, I kind of picked it up through my mate, and you know, the internet is a brilliant thing. You can just learn what's called tab, where you don't need to read music. I still can't read or write music. It's almost like a kind of weird like visual maths thing, which anyone could.
I wouldn't stretch as far as
no. I'm telling you, anyone could look at this stuff, and it's an immediately simplifying thing that you can use to learn guitar. I had 2 lessons, I think, at very early doors, because that's naturally what you're told to do. Learn C, A, and G or something.
Yeah,
and that was like, I actually want to write my own stuff. It's purely driven through writing my own stuff that I actually became self-taught, if you see what I mean.
Okay. I think we'll give you 2 lessons, because I had maybe 20 drum lessons, and let's just say I don't play the drums anymore. The other really interesting thing I picked up on was that you said you felt like you were more of a songwriter than a singer, but then singing was the only way you could express what it was that you were producing creatively. I've not met many musicians, but it's interesting because you identify as a singer-songwriter, but it's almost like songwriter who happens to sing, because that's where the creative expression's coming from. Are there, from like the people you know, people out there that might have really great songwriting ability but not have that willingness to perform? Because by the sounds of it, from speaking to you, I don't think you really come across as someone that wants to necessarily be in the centre of attention and in front of everyone, but kind of putting yourself into that uncomfortable situation to express yourself clearly pay dividends down the line. Do you know people that haven't had as much willingness, and what would your advice be to them to just purely pursue the songwriting route?
You see so many people like that, and I suppose the reason I see it a lot is because I meet and know a lot of professional songwriters, and they are people that just have a talent and a work ethic driven towards writing songs, and they might not have. I think everyone's got a bit of a voice, you know, everyone can do something with it, but there's obviously a stark difference between people that really love singing and the people that
love singing in the shower.
Love singing in the shower, baby. And you know, for some people, they're born with a real talent for writing songs that maybe if it's through confidence, they don't want to be the center of attention, as you say, or sheerly through like a lack of willingness to try and sing. If it's the songwriting that they can make it turn into a profession, you know. So I know a lot of people like that, definitely.
Because again, I might be getting this completely wrong and butchering your art, so apologies if so, but it reminds me of there's a comedian I once met, and they said that a lot of comedians are typically introverts because they like to sit there and write out what they want to perform, but then when they actually go to perform, it's not necessarily kind of with the grain and kind of goes against the grain, but they have to put themselves out there. And interesting that singer-songwriter, I hadn't really thought about it before, but they're kind of counterintuitive in that, like, if you're someone that likes singing, you're perhaps not going to be the person that likes sitting there and writing, but to do both is remarkable, really.
I mean, you know, there's a lot of people out there that do both, or might side more heavily on one side of the coin than the other, but there's also, you know, it's the introversion, the extroversion thing, like, it's such a mixed bag. Like, there's so many people that are unbelievably talented. Like, one of my favorite artists, Ben Howard, for instance, like, I've seen him multiple times on stage, massive introvert, you know, but doesn't stop. Number one, he's a great songwriter, but he's also got a hell of a voice and a hell of a way of kind of converting his performance into something that's genuinely powerful. But it's not like he's dancing around on stage like Nicki Minaj or something like that, you know what I mean? It's like
shout out.
Exactly, shout out Nicki. It's like there's many different introverts that still manage to perform and have an amazing performance in their own way, you know what I mean?
And so going back to that journey that you were taking us on, when your auntie had kind of started to nurture and foster your talent with you and support you, so you were about, like you said, 15, 16, somewhere in that region. Where did it go from there? Where did you start to kind of take this from being more of a passion type of interest to something that you believed you actually wanted to do as a potential full-time career or something of that nature?
I think the turning point was really actually like getting those first recordings done. So like that was her main thing. She wasn't going to be like, hey Sam, you know, I'm going to get you a record deal, you're a star and all this kind of stuff. It was like, you've got some great songs here, you should go and record them. And she basically, and this was like amazing at the time I didn't know who this guy really was, but her brother is a guy called Kevin Shields, who is the lead songwriter and guitarist for a band called My Bloody Valentine, who are
No way.
Yeah, in their
Amazing.
sphere, you know, they're like a cult legend of a band, you know.
Hopefully this wasn't like some ghostwriting arrangement and we've just cat's out the bag.
No, honestly, it's like, you know, he was this kind of almost ethereal bloke that I wasn't aware of at the time. He was just this normal guy walking around the house. Like, we have family Christmases together and stuff, and it was at one of those that she introduced me and him. It's just this guy with like long white hair that just smoked a load of weed, and like that was like as far as it went. And I was like, he's a cool guy. And then she was like, I've spoken to Kevin, he maybe wants to record something with you. Would you like to go? And I was like, hell yeah, we'll go. And she like, we were in Ireland at the time because it's an Irish family, and took me to Grouse Lodge. When we walked through the door, they just gave us like the day in this room for free, because they were like,
Is that a recording studio?
It's huge recording
Okay.
studio.
Amazing.
It's mad that like my first time recording, you know, most of the time I'm working in a room like this, you know what I mean? But the very first time, it's like Michael Jackson's recorded there, Muse has recorded there, all these people, and like,
wow.
you know, I was let in because they were like, Kevin. And,
For those just listening, they were bowing down to Kevin.
yeah, exactly. And he was a sweetheart and sat me on a stool, and you know, there wasn't much to it. He's put a mic in front of me and said, just do some live takes. We'll do like a few. I'll put a little bit of reverb on it. You got your first demos, and that finally I had like an MP3 of what I was at the time to show people. Because you can't just go up to any Tom, Dick and Harry and just get your guitar out, and you need to be able to send stuff or whatever. And then, to answer your point, really, BBC Introducing, that was the first thing. So I sent that to BBC Introducing.
Oh wow.
And then that was my first radio play.
And just on that, sending it off to BBC Introducing, again, being creative, like it's an expression of you. Like, how was that? Like, kind of being like, this is quite a big deal, sending a part of myself off to a huge corporation. Like, was that again something that your aunt had suggested, or was that something that you did on your own initiative?
I think so.
Just before you answer that, it would be great if you can sort of tailor your response in the context of like, for our listeners, like for their benefit of, you know, I'm 18 or an aspiring musician.
Yeah.
How can this work for me?
Basically, I knew about it before she'd said anything. It's so universally kind of inclusive of everyone. There's a thing you go to online, bbcintroducing.com or whatever. It says upload your track here. Anyone can do it. You could be awful, you could be great, you could be somewhere in the middle. You could just really believe in yourself. You upload your file, you give yourself an artist name, and then that's basically you away. And that's what I did. And then what happens, the great thing about BBC Introducing, they all listen to it. Like everything they're sent, there's
someone's actually like filtering through, and
they have to listen to it. It's the best thing about it. And the way they do that, it's not like there's one London office that it's regionally based. So I uploaded to BBC Introducing in Shropshire, which is where I grew up. And then it's like BBC Introducing, you know, Lancashire or Surrey or Guildford, you know, wherever it is. So they have to listen to tunes that come in. And then if they think you're half decent, they'll give you a spin.
Okay.
That's your first time on the radio.
And obviously you had this like privilege and great benefit of having your auntie and somewhat of a creative family dynamic, and particularly, is it your uncle?
Yeah, so my mum's side, her brother, and both of her brothers were actors.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
If someone doesn't have the benefit of that, where would you say is like a good place to start when you're in that particular point of your career? Is it researching things like BBC Introducing, and maybe, I don't know, if you have to maybe spend a little bit of money to put together some kind of demo, something like that? Would they start there? What would be some of your tips for someone in that position?
Well, I think, you know, absolutely, BBC Introducing, anyone can do it. You know, if you can get on the internet and you have like some recorded music, put it up. How you record your music, you don't even these days need a budget. on your laptops. You know, I you know, this is 10 years ago when there wasn't such an overwhelming amount of kind of bedroom producers out there, but obviously I've learned since how to do that, and now anyone can record their song, arguably to a better standard than those early recordings were done for me, on their laptop. So, you know, obviously you need a bit of money to get a laptop or whatever, but if you've got those things in place, you can record your own stuff, and you can send it for free to BBC Introducing. So.
Amazing. That's a really good place to start.
Yeah, I think we'll have to include a link to that in the show notes, because again, forgive my absolute naivety with anything musical, but I didn't know about that, and I've got some friends who have been aspiring musicians, and to the extent they haven't heard about it, I'll definitely be resharing that with them. So, cool. In terms of your career development, you had been kind of playing recreationally. Your aunt had essentially told you to get some stuff down in a recording. This musical legend that you, unbeknownst to you, takes you along.
It's mad because I'm a huge fan of his now. Like My Bloody Valentine, and now one of my favourite bands. So it's like
amazing.
I just didn't. It probably helped actually because I wasn't starstruck. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So he takes you along to the studio. You get your recording in. You go to the BBC site and upload it. What does your career development look like then from that point? And what sort of age were you as well? Because presumably you've got exams and university to think about potentially. I don't know what sort of external pressures you might have faced, and to have pursued a musical career at that point in time. It'd just be interesting to hear a bit more about that too.
Yeah, well, I guess when I put my first things out, I was 17 maybe, I think. So obviously you're in year 12 or whatever, and end of school's rapidly approaching. But I was really passionate about it at that point, and not that I was like, this is absolutely what I'm going to devote my life to at that point, but I was certainly devoting a big part of my life to that. And yeah, it was basically upload to them. They started playing a few of my songs on the radio, on local radio on BBC Shropshire. I think, that was as far as those particular songs got. I also put it on YouTube, all those kind of early things. And then I went to start playing open mic nights, so I needed to start playing live as well, right? So I went out and started playing live at open mic nights in my local area. I did like an open mic competition, got into the final of that, and just things on a local level started, just, friends figured out I was into this, and they started supporting me and all this kind of stuff. End of school came. I had a girlfriend from Australia at the time, who I went out to be with for a year of my life, basically. But I took my guitar over, and I made an absolute promise to myself every week I would do bare minimum 1 open mic, 2, 3, 4 if I could. Every week I had to hit that 1 open mic. I had to get in front of a crowd every week, because that's the next part, which is the most important thing I can share with anyone, is you, as an artist, if you don't want to just be a songwriter, you want to be a performer, that you can sing perfectly in your bedroom, perform really well. Having that stagecraft and that ability to get on stage in front of other people and do what you do in your bedroom the same out there to them and better, that only happens when you just put in miles and miles of work.
Yeah, go ahead, Alex.
We might be about to say the same thing, but it reminds me of Malcolm Gladwell's book Outliers, where he talks about the Beatles and the fact that I think they played in a Hungarian nightclub and got paid next to nothing, but they were playing every night, and that was where they got their 10,000 hours in for performing, such that when they did break onto the big stage, they were professionals before having had what people would consider to be professional experience. So no, it really resonates, and great tip there.
Also, when I read, I know it's not musical, but Kevin Hart's book, and he talked about that the same, being in the comedy clubs and on the circuit, because you can't just be at home making music, and as you say, you might sound phenomenal, but unless you're out there honing your craft and also networking and meeting people, and you don't know who's listening to you, it's going to be more difficult to actually put your music forward.
It actually reminds me, of a really good concept about the importance of play, but this is literal play in front of people. And the reason why kind of playing sports growing up, or if it's a performer performing as regularly as possible, is important, is because you're getting real-time feedback that you wouldn't otherwise get in your bedroom by yourself.
Or by your mum, who's your biggest fan.
And the most important side of that is being told your shit occasionally. Because honestly, you do just at 17 as well. You think you're like, I grew up in a rural place in the middle of nowhere. Like, you think you are the best thing on planet Earth. you do if you've got like any modicum of kind of self-belief, and like you need that person saying, "Fucking hell, you're a bit ropey out there tonight, mate," or like, "That's just not my cup of tea," to like bring you down to earth and make you start working harder. Because you just need that kind of ability to, you know, grow your skin that bit thicker, because this is a hard place to be. I
was actually going to ask that, being as young as you were. Sorry, go on, Alex.
No, so just on that last point before we wrap it up, it reminds me of something that Ray Dalio, I was listening to a podcast of his earlier, and he was talking about the importance of having audacity with your efforts, but then also humility at the same time. And like, clearly when you're young, you have all that audacity, you get up on stage, you think you're going to smash it, but then you get humbled quickly. But when you can strike the balance between the two, that's where like real growth occurs. So just wanted to share that too.
Absolutely.
No, that's a great concept, Alex. And what I was going to say is, being so young, in your school and peer group, you know, growing that thicker skin is, I would imagine, is really essential, because, you know, especially as kids, there's a lot of criticism and people can poke fun and stuff. Did you struggle with that at all, or how did you deal with it when you did come across some negative feedback? I
knew that I couldn't listen to it for more than 2 seconds. I knew that like the main thing that counts is my belief in myself, and I had the kind of, I've always kind of thought of it as like a core, like an ember that just constantly is turning over and burning a little bit inside you somewhere. Like, occasionally someone throws a bit of fucking water on it or whatever, as long as it's still burning at the end of it. And I always like, I suppose that's lucky for me, because not everyone has that. But even now, like 10 years down the line, I still have that. And I think it takes people knocking you back a million times over for you to kind of actually, if you're still standing, it almost makes you kind of realize you're here for and doing this for a particular reason, I suppose, and you're just not giving up, because that's the most important thing you can put in there, is like not giving up, really.
I love all that. It sounds like you found your purpose through pursuing your passion, despite the kind of negative criticism you might have received along the way, which I think is beautiful, and I think it's a real kind of takeaway for all of us. Like, actually, if you keep getting up and keep on going with whatever it is you're pursuing, despite the feedback, that's almost a signal to yourself, like you said, that this is something that's important to me and I'm going to pursue regardless.
Absolutely, And I think like, I've always thought in terms of, you know, I think you only ever truly fail when you give up. Like, that's kind of it, right? Especially in something like this. It's like, you know, people can't really label you a failure or a failed musician unless you know,
hang up the mic,
hang up the gloves, whatever. That's you know. So if you keep going all the way until you 6 feet under, you can never really say that you failed with anything, I don't think.
Because you can take off at any time of your life, right? Whatever that is or means to you. So what's really coming through to me is, from a young age, obviously you had a talent which you've nurtured, and you've had people around you nurturing it with you. But what you've had to apply is a lot of discipline, a lot of consistency, dedication, taking in that live feedback, but also believing in yourself, and continuing to push forward regardless of any setbacks. With that, how did you get to a point from kind of, you know, doing the BBC introducing, to then putting out a bit of music casually, to being picked up by a record label, and what did that look like for you in terms of your career trajectory? Because I think it would be great for our listeners to hear kind of how that process works, you know, how you maybe get found or discovered, and then what it all looks like.
Yeah, well, yeah, there's definitely a difference between those early miles that you have to put in before you get to that kind of point. But very kind of, you know, briefly to get to the manager, the label part, like what happened for me was, went out to Australia, as I said, I did all the open mics. I then met, through doing those open mics, as you say, you network as well as you play, a producer. I asked him to record some new songs for me. I produced those, and then I took those home with me, put those out again to BBC Introducing. This time it wasn't just spot plays. It was like they made one track of the week and then they were playing that every day for a month.
Oh, wow.
And still, it's only local radio, so it only has a limited reach, but it's good. It's something to like talk on your socials about, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then I finished school. Well, I'd finished school before the gap year, but I came back and I had a place at BIM University, so it's called British Institute of Modern Music, in Bristol. And like the main reason I was going there is because George Ezra had gone there, James Bay had gone to the Brighton one. There was a good thing of like singer-songwriters like myself that had come through there, which is really funny because I'm actually now on the same label or kind of published by the same people that do George Ezra and James Bay. So I'm only making that in my head now, but it is funny how things work out. And I went there not with the education in mind, to be honest, because like school for me, I've never been particularly great with the kind of academic side of things. But certainly I went there to network and meet new musicians. Did that, was there for a year, met my backing band, wrote more songs. They formed the kind of colour behind me for this new record that I put out, and it was that I recorded in Bristol that I put out on SoundCloud. And I really made a conscious effort to email 100 blogs. Maybe you get 10 blogs saying this is great and we'll write about it. You get a few reposts on SoundCloud. That finally got to the ears of a manager in Brighton, and they got in touch with me and said, are you managed? And it was at the point where I knew that was the next thing I needed to do. And I'd been for years waiting for that to happen, and finally I got that email saying you managed. They seemed reputable. They came on board. We met in London and they took me on, and that was my first agent manager, which, as I was saying to Nick before on the way here, it's like that in terms of a professional move forward, like that's the most important decision you make, is who becomes your manager. And it's also like the most important part of your team and the main way into the industry, the larger industry.
Wow.
Wow. Yeah, there was so much in there, but it was just
you literally took us on the journey.
Yeah, you really did, Sam. No, that, you know, it's so awesome. You've come such a long way in such a short space of time, I think, in the context of your life. Yeah,
10 years.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But you know, it's it just shows, like, and I hope people are picking up on this that are listening, that you can't just put music out there and hope to be discovered. There is so much, I would imagine there's so much content out there, whether it's music or podcasts or whatever, that you have to make a really conscious effort to take like extreme action, which is something that you did by emailing tons of blogs and going to the shows and doing open mics and just trying to get your music out there. And it's so like hugely important to do that for anyone that is considering this sort of career or wants to pursue their passion in music as a career.
Yeah, no, Nicky, I completely echo your comments. It was exactly what I was thinking. It's the side of a musician's career that you don't get to see. It's all that additional background work of really pushing your content out there. And even prior to getting the agency interest, doing all that performance work so that you're not just someone that can produce a track, but you're someone that they can put out there and perform. And yeah, I think there's so much for our listeners to take away there. And yeah, thanks so much for sharing that with us, because it's really educational.
Yeah, it's great. Now, I'd imagine, is this kind of where your career really took off at this point?
That's definitely when all those things I'd always dreamed of, record labels, bigger shows, support slots with artists that I respected, became a possibility. It wasn't like it happened overnight. Definitely, like, it was still effectively what a manager does. And what happened to me is they take you back to ground level. My manager said, you need to take all your stuff offline again.
Oh wow!
All the music you put out, because effectively, you know, it's an industry where they need to market you and package you in the right way, for better or worse. And they knew that there was better music that they could get out of me to try and get towards that point of kind of record deals and stuff. So they stripped everything bare.
And how did that feel for you personally, having spent that length of time developing that? Is there a conflict in your mind about, well, is this the right thing for me? Are they doing the right thing? Or were you kind of all in at that point?
I think I was like 80% all in.
Yeah.
I was willing to. I'd effectively worked to a point where I wanted to get these kind of people on board that could give me an entrance into the wider industry. So if they're telling me, I wasn't overly precious about the music I'd put out anyway, and I knew that actually the songs that I've been writing since were better.
Yeah.
I knew that they're MP3s at the end of the day that I could release at another point. I think it would have been different if I'd had a viral moment or something where something had really caught fire and had a kind of organic life of its own. And they probably wouldn't want that down either. The fact that they'd only really heard me. I'd had like a few thousand streams on something. It wasn't the biggest loss in my life to get rid of that, to start again.
Yeah.
So they do that, and then you start playing those initial shows where, again, as much as I'd played all those open mics, it's different when you've got a manager and they're inviting record labels down and you're playing with other bands that have been doing it for years and years and years. Suddenly you're a shell again. So you start again and you're nervously performing, and then you start your stagecraft journey and you have to get 1 million of those in the bag. But at least this time round, they know 1 million people in the industry, and they're inviting Joe Bloggs from Polydor or whoever it is, and you're getting in the eyes of good people at that point.
And just for the benefit of our listeners, so how does that agency relationship work? I might be asking a really dumb question here, but do they kind of give you in advance and say, look, and you don't have to get into the actual specifics of it, but or is it kind of you're a salaried member? I just have never really looked into this.
Well, no. So there's maybe 3 or 4 different pillars of your career as an artist, right? So number 1, managers. These are the people that are your literal right-hand man. They book a lot of your shows. They are the people inviting record labels down. They're the people helping you craft your music. They, for the benefit of them being there, for you and them, they'll take 20% of your profit. So that's the industry standard, really, is 20%. That hasn't changed since like the 50s. It's mad. But that's what they're commissioned on. So they're really
incentivized.
They're incentivized to make you big, and also, it becomes a relationship in tandem with each other. So you have to. I think the reason I said it's the most important part of your career is getting that in place. It's also the most important part of your career to get right. I really wasn't that much of a big fish, so I only had one person showing a lot of interest, so I didn't have a lot of options. Luckily for me, they were good people. But if you're one of these people that do have a viral moment or whatever, there's loads and loads of managers coming at you.
The sharks start to encircle you.
And they are the most important part of your team. You have to trust them with your life, effectively. So you need to get that right. And then after that, as I was saying, there's the pillars to it. Your record label is effectively, and again, I was saying this to Nick on the way to kind of make a easy metaphor for it, they're your shop that sell your product. So you've written your songs, you've recorded your songs, they'll pay for you to record the songs, so they're a bank as well, so they finally invest in you. Your managers don't give you any money, they're just like working for free until they get their 20%. The record label will give you money for a price, so they'll invest a lot of money in you, marketing-wise, and all of the above, and they'll take, depending on what kind of deal you're on, a certain percentage of your earnings on the music that they sign you for. So basically there's major record labels and there's indie record labels. The majors are they're mainly Universal Music, Sony Music, and Warner's Music. I might be forgetting a few there, but those are the main 3. The indie record labels are anyone from like Domino or Dirty Hit to you if you started a record label tomorrow. It's just the kind of smaller fish, but they do have a sizable influence like Domino. And the difference between them basically is a major label obviously is a huge conglomerate business which do everything, and they have a huge amount of money, so they can maybe give you more money up front and market you in a better way, but that often comes at less. They take more of your pie. So a typical major label record deal will be literally 80% to the record label, 20% to you.
Wow.
It's crazy. It's crazy. It's maths that any other profession you would never do, right? But then an indie deal might be 50-50, but then they won't be able to invest as much in you.
Yeah. And is that why it's so important to, first of all, have really like solid people around you, good advisors, probably a good lawyer
Yeah.
as well in the
Yeah.
industry, and a really good manager.
Yeah.
Because they're the ones that are there kind of filtering all the rubbish.
Exactly. That's
Yeah,
why
okay.
you need a really good person there as your
Yeah.
manager, because they're
Yeah.
the people that have been there and done it before, and a good lawyer as
Yeah,
well.
yeah, amazing.
And was there another pillar?
Yeah, so then you've got, what have I done? Managers, most important. Record labels are like your shop window. You're like Waterstones if you're an author. They're the people selling your book.
Or Amazon?
Exactly, or Amazon or whoever it is. And you've got your publishers if you're a songwriter. It doesn't matter so much if you're just a singer, but most singers, even if they're not really songwriters, they'll have a portion of their songwriting in each song now. So if you're a real songwriter, publishers are the people that effectively buy your songwriting, a percentage of your songwriting rights, and they'll give you an advance for it. So they'll pay you up front for an album, and the same works for a record deal. So you get an advance up front. That's the first time you see real money, at least in my case for music, was like the first time you get an advance, but it's always at a price. So those are the people that handle your kind of writing royalties. And then lastly is your live agent, who basically are responsible for booking your shows. They're the people that know very good promoters, and they might get you on, if you're the luckiest person in the world, the Ed Sheeran tour or whatever.
Glasgow and all that.
Exactly, Glasgow. They're specifically tailored to getting live opportunity. So those are like the 4 pillars of most artists.
And it sounds like it depends on what route you take, what structure you'll have. So either you piece together these different pillars yourself, or a label will do it basically for you for a large cost.
Yeah, I don't think it's even the label. It's like, it's your managers at the end of the day.
Okay.
Like you might not want to sign a record deal. You might not want to sign a publishing deal. You might not want to sign the live agent thing away, because your managers might just be able to do it for you.
Yeah.
I think it's all depend. Like, I know people that are doing so well under their own steam that why would they give any percentage to that?
Yeah.
They'd have to get a lot of money. But the thing with majors is they've got a lot of money, and at some point they're going to offer you, dangle a carrot that's too hard to reach.
Golden carrot.
Yeah, the golden carrot.
Exactly.
So, I mean, look, you've set out the journey really well, particularly as Sam Johnson, sort of under the brand Sam Johnson. And we love to give our guests their flowers. We love to see our friends win. So you're a very humble guy, and you come across in that way. I mean, are you comfortable sharing with our listeners kind of, who you ended up eventually signing for, and the kind of artists you were supporting on tours as well, to kind of give that idea of, what this journey and all that hard work eventually amounted to?
Yeah. After getting my managers, we did a lot of building. I wrote some better songs. They also brought like producers and songwriters in to help collaborate with me to make the art kind of stronger at the time. This is the kind of timeline he's talking about. A year from then, I've maybe got my live agent in place, so they're getting me better gigs. And then at that point, the record labels are starting to show up to the festivals I'm playing. Then a year after that, I'm signing the deal. So it's 2 years after my managers turned up. And then when you sign your deal, I signed to Universal Music, mainly out of Germany, I think. It was Island Records out there. And then later on, Republic in America, which are also a part of Universal Music. So I signed to major labels on that side, and then I signed my publishing to a company called Closer, who, as I said before, they're mainly known for managing, but they do George Ezra, James Bay, Polly Humstone, all these kind of people. And I signed my live agent to what was known as Coda at the time, but they changed to Paradigm. So like Paradigm, funny enough, they work in sport promotion as well. So like Conor McGregor's signed to Paradigm and stuff. Okay. There's a music element to it too. So those are that was my record label publishing and live setup. And then, as things got on, I got to support some great artists. Like I did a tour with Jade Bird, who was blowing up at the time, and she's still doing really well. Unfortunately, I got a chest infection during that European tour, no. So I literally, it was horrible. I could barely sing every night. It was awful. But, I got the opportunity to play with her.
Yeah.
I played under Lewis Capaldi at a show once. I played under all sorts of people at festivals. I played with Tom Odell recently, and yeah, I very fortunately got to play Wembley once, which was insane.
Wow, that's incredible.
But you know, these are kind of, they're amazing experiences when it's happening. But it's amazing how quickly, like, you know, that can either mean something or it can't.
Yeah.
And you know, unless you're on a real roll and things are steamrolling forward, like, these can either be like a highlight memory for you, or something that really kind of continues to happen. And I think momentum's a big part of that. But those are the things that happen.
And that's why the journey is so important, because, and we talk about this a number of times, you know, particularly happiness, it's in the moment, like you say.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so incredibly important to enjoy the journey, and not worry so much about the destination, because you had your journey and you've had those moments, but now the journey continues, and you're on a new path. But it's so impressive, and you know, I wish I could have gone to one of those shows. I got to go to one recently in a really intimate spot. It was amazing to watch. I really enjoyed it. So
Cheers, man.
We'll include kind of links to any upcoming events, definitely, in the show notes.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Did you have any other questions on Sam Johnson?
No, nothing else on Sam Johnson. No.
So we understand that Cartwright is the next project, and we wanted to know why and what the future looks like. If you wouldn't just mind giving us an overview of that would be great.
Absolutely. And this kind of, like, we're talking about all the highs, right? The main thing about this industry that I've definitely learned over the years, it's like the most bipolar industry that I've ever encountered. It's known like that for a reason. And you know, I wasn't helped by the fact the pandemic happened just as I was about to release with that record label I was telling you about. But things were doing great for a while, and then I started releasing with this major label, and it became quite obvious to me in my heart at the time that the music I ended up releasing at that point, bar a few songs, wasn't really what I wanted to be doing. There was a lot of compromise, and there was a lot of moments where I was looking at some music videos and all sorts of things where I was like, what the hell is that? Like, this isn't me. And this is obviously the age-old thing that happens to artists, but the long story short of it is 2020, so like just in March 2020, got dropped by the label. It wasn't like, I mean, it feels like the worst thing at the time, but really it wasn't, because I was kind of having a lot of problems with them anyway. I wasn't feeling artistically kind of in tune with them, but that happened, you know, and that's after 10 years of my life where I've kind of like built to a point where I'm really happy with things. So suddenly it all went away. Pandemic was there. I was then looking at my managers who I've worked with for like 5 years, and brilliant, lovely people, but I thought, am I going to continue doing this? Am I going to go all over again? And if so, who am I going to bring along? And I ultimately basically got a camper van in Plymouth kind of this time last year, and rented it and drove around the country by myself. And I was just like, I need to like get my headspace, realign what the hell I want to do with my life. Did that. One of the best trips of my life, you know, super lonely at points, super like hard, but ultimately I came back and I was like, nah, I still want to do this, and I've got a lot more to give. At that point I had the decision of, do I keep going as Sam Johnson? Really, I'd have loved to, but there was so much music I'd released at that point that I wasn't happy with, that if I could delete that, fine, I'll keep going as Sam Johnson. The record label wouldn't let me do that because they're still earning from me. At that point I was like, oh, screw this, I'll rename and go again. So effectively I'm taking my middle name, which is Cartwright, as you've said.
Do you want to give us a little insight into how you came about, sort of, you know, obviously the middle name, but the discovery you had along your journey on the trip as well? Yeah,
it's super cool. So as I said, I did this solo trip around in this camper van, and my dad used to go to a fishing spot up in Scotland. He always used to bang on about it, and I'd never been, and I thought I was going to try and like find this place, and you know, I didn't have really any idea where it was apart from near Lockerbie somewhere, and my uncle basically used to go with him and knew roughly where it was, and he told me kind of roughly on a map where it was. man, this is the most remote place I've ever been in my life. It's like forest, it's super rainy and drizzly. As soon as I cross the border, you can barely see anything. Quite creepy as well, like proper like logging country, like just alpine forests everywhere.
I'm thinking Lord of the Rings.
Yeah,
a bit like that. Just
you can just hear the Hard Work Beats Talent theme tune playing in the background. Like
That's it.
We didn't rip it, we promise.
Basically found this place.
So you found the actual fishing village?
Found this little cottage, which was where my dad used to fish, and I knew it was it because I finally got a bit of signal, and my uncle was like, that's it right there, and I'd found it, and because how remote it was, the people inside came out because they haven't probably seen a car up there in flipping weeks, you know what I mean? And they came out like, "You all right? What are you up to?" And
a bit
I was
lost.
like, exactly. And I said, my dad used to fish up here. I think this might have been his uncle, so my great uncle Jack's cottage. And they're like, "Oh, Jack Cartwright." And I was like, yeah. And they were like, "Oh yeah, we knew Jack. I think my wife knew him." So he gets his wife out, or his partner, I think, and she comes out and she's like, "Yeah, Jack Cartwright, and I knew his wife well, Jean. Jean's been like my whole life, my auntie. I knew her really well, and she'd just passed away, bless her, a year before that. And she's like, "Yeah, we sprinkled Jean's ashes in the wildflowers just over here."
Wow.
I was like, "What? Who are these people? This is insane." So at the time, obviously, I'm having this big crisis, thinking, what do I do? Do I carry on with music? If I do carry on with music, what am I going to call myself? I've come up with all sorts of pretentious names, like Bloom and like all sorts of just ridiculous names.
Love that.
But it had to mean something to me. So when I obviously knew my middle name was always Cartwright, but then I had a reason to go with that. I kind of knew at that point to call it Cartwright.
Wow.
Amazing. What a journey.
What a journey. And it sounds like the whole trip was a real journey of self-discovery, and amazing that you were able to go through that, and that there was the kind of discovery of, I do want to keep doing this, and I'm going to pursue my passion, and I can't wait to watch where that takes you.
Cheers, man. Thank you. Yeah, I've got, I then came back and recorded a record, went back to the basics of the producer that I've always loved to work with, a guy called Elliot James, very good friend of mine, brilliantly talented bloke. Had the songs at that point that I really wanted to recorded that in Christmas last year. So now, in answer to your kind of question before, it's like we're just looking for a new label partner, which I'm hoping to get right this time, to put it out. And so we begin again.
There we go. The rebirth.
Amazing.
Can't wait to see what that holds.
Yeah.
The only other kind of point I wanted to touch on there was when you said you obviously got dropped by the record label, and at the time as the pandemic was starting, it must have been really tough to deal with kind of emotionally, but looking back on it, having that perspective and realizing that wasn't quite right for you and it wasn't the right fit, and by the sounds of it, you've arrived in I'm sure will be a far better place, hopefully finding the right match with the music label and putting out the music that you want to. But I think just for our guests to take away there, sometimes the failures are actually big opportunities to have a rebirth of sorts.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope so, and you see it a lot. I think I heard something crazy, like Katy Perry got dropped back in the day. Like, she wasn't selling any units on this label that she was with, and then, she really struggled to get a new deal. Someone signed her up eventually, and now obviously we know who Katy Perry is. Like,
she's all over Just Eat.
Yeah. Is she on Just Eat? Is she doing the...
She's the advert, It's actually quite cringeworthy to watch. Really? There you go.
Maybe she's fallen hard times again.
I doubt it. I just think they made her an offer she couldn't refuse, So, moving on to sort of your more of like a personal perspective and background. In this segment, we like to get a little bit deeper into kind of where you came from, your parents' background, your upbringing, and some of the key challenges that you faced growing up, to give our listeners a bit of an insight into what's behind, the sort of the person that we see kind of day to day. So why don't we start with your parents and what your childhood looked like, where you went to school, things like that. You mentioned your dad was an architect, mum was a nurse. Like, what did that mean for your family and your home structure?
So I was born in West Middlesex Hospital, so in Brentford, funnily enough, where I now live. But then my dad being an architect, I think he got a job in Doha in Qatar. So I spent the first 3 years of my life out in a desert,
Oh,
effectively.
wow.
Not that I can really remember a lot of it,
Yeah.
but he was out there, and we came back to the UK, and he grew up in a place called Ellesmere, which is in Shropshire, North Welsh border town, basically, just on the English side. And he moved us there. We lived there for a bit, and then I ended up just basically growing up in Shropshire. My mum and dad bought a little cottage in the middle of nowhere, really small little spot, with like a couple of fields around it. And I grew up there. And then basically, you know, I'm an only child, which I think is like, you know, the more I think about it, probably like a big fundamental part of who I am as a person. You know, I think like I was very luckily able to go to private school because my mum and dad like put literally everything that they had into that. If I'd had a sibling, there's no way I would have been able to do that.
Yeah.
So I think that was a big thing. Not that educationally it kind of did much for me because I was such a fuck up at school, but
Well, I was just gonna ask you very briefly then.
Yeah.
Like, do you think if you didn't go to the school you went to, your path may have been changed in some way, or do you think things would have played out?
I don't know. I think like it wasn't like responsible for me being like having a
Right.
kind of urge to write music or do
Yeah.
anything like
Yeah.
that. And there was no real part of the kind of, obviously you have a huge amount of privilege and opportunity to go to a school like that, and it's amazing. But I don't think musically it like gave me any more opportunity than anywhere else would.
Yeah.
And certainly my friends and stuff, like they're still some of my closest friends in the world, my boys that I grew up with, and like none of them were musical either. So I can't even say that the school I went to is where I met some musical people.
Yeah.
How about from a confidence perspective? So I was just sharing something with you. My parents similarly like struggled to put us through private school, and I'm forever grateful. But I definitely think from at least a confidence perspective, it's changed who I am. Some of the messages we would get from teachers growing up is like, no, you're going to do well, you're going to be fine. Just those throwaway comments probably did build a degree of like kind of, whether it was founded or not, confidence to try things. I don't know if you found that at all.
Yeah. Oh man, like I was speaking musically, obviously in that kind of sphere, but what you're saying, that's for me the main thing about going through an educational system like that is like, and you're so lucky to have it, is this confidence. And like you kind of know pretty much like any person you bump into on the street if they've had that kind of background, because it's just like bred into you, this kind of confidence, I guess. And that's
delusion
slash delusion, maybe. Definitely, like it's not always for the best, but that is definitely, I think, something that you get from that. And I don't know why that is. I don't know like for what reason. It's kind of, I think maybe you're in smaller classes or whatever, and therefore they can devote more time to you. That's definitely something which helped me, and I was very fortunate to get that. But obviously you have more confidence, more kind of people telling you that you're worth it, I guess. And
That's
And just moving on, do you want to give us a bit of an overview as to like kind of what like you said, you were an only child, and that kind of dictated who you are today. What did you mean by that?
I've always felt a bit more of an island, you know. I know that I really only have my mum, as I'll get into in a second, my dad passed away when I was quite young, and you know, having no siblings in itself, as much as people do the age-old thing of, oh, you're a spoiled brat, all this kind of stuff, like luckily for me I wasn't really raised like that anyway, but certainly you have you get thicker skin, you know. Even when you're young, you have this weird relationship with death almost, because you know, like there's so little people in your inner circle that you know that you're going to have to get strong quick, because they're not always going to be around. And I think that immediately developed my sense of anxiety for one, but also my sense of kind of, again, confidence and belief in myself and a backbone, really. I think that's the main thing that I could take from being an only child, really.
Yeah. And that's really brave of you to have shared, so really appreciate that. And I think a lot of our listeners will take a lot away from that. Now, you alluded to it there, some of the key challenges that you faced growing up. Would you mind sharing with us kind of, what happened with your father passing away, how you dealt with that, and sort of how it changed the course of your life as well?
Yeah, man, like something like that doesn't happen to you without it massively changing who you are as a person. And you know, I'm still, you know, massively hurt by that whole experience, and I think, you know, as much as I've learned to deal with it, it's still there. But I think, you know, personally what happened was, as I said, I went on that gap year, and my dad was still kicking. He was always older for me as well. That's the other thing, like, as well as being an only child, my mum is probably a bit more of a normal age, but she's still in her mid to late 60s now. But my dad was always a lot older than me. There's 50 years between us. So he was 72 when he died, and I was 20. So, you know, there was always that anyway, which in the back of my head meant that he wasn't going to be around for as long as maybe I wanted him to, but it certainly still happened way earlier than it should. Yeah. I went to Australia, had the best year of my life out there, obviously with FaceTiming all the time, and I can see he's getting a bit kind of skinnier, but he's always loved a drink, and he just was playing it off as like, oh, I've given up drinking. I was like, fucking good on you, Dad. Oh, no, you're looking good. But when I got off the flight, you know, so buzzed to see my parents. Hadn't seen them in a year, and, you know, gave him a hug, and he was like wincing with the hug, and like he was a lot skinnier, and like I knew something was wrong there. Even then, in my kind of naivety, I was only 19 then, and my godfather like drove as well, his best mate, and like I was taking it all in, there's something wrong with Dad, but I never thought it was what it was. He sat me down a couple of days later, terminal liver cancer. You know, that's Gosh. When you sit down and you have that, man, like it's...
Yeah, I mean, I can't even begin to imagine you know, how you felt at that time, and, you know, I mean, really sorry for your loss, and it's such a young age as well, and I'm sure your entire family really felt that. And well, thank you, appreciate it, but it's one of those where obviously it's just an earth-shattering thing at the time, but 7 years later I can talk about it, you know, and I'm actually a far stronger person as a result. It was a horrible time. The one thing I will say is, like, I was fortunate enough that I had a year with him after that before he did pass away, and that, not that I ever had bad relationship with my dad, but we became so much stronger, man, like so much more of a unit. He opened up to me in ways that he hadn't ever done before. I just was like, you know, I couldn't have asked for more of a kind of, you know, open and honest experience with my father before he went. And when I turned 20, he died that summer, and, you know, my whole life got turned upside down. But ultimately I still had my mum. My friends were amazing for me, you know, all my schoolmates that I grew up with, and, you know, I couldn't have asked for more support from them. And really, I tell you what, if there's anything that makes you get up in the morning and like think about what you want to do with your life and how you want to live it, when you've just seen how easy it can be snapped away from you like that. If I'm looking at death that early in my life and I'm thinking, well, if that's going to happen to me at some point, how am I going to live my years? I'm going to do it doing something I enjoy. That's it. Absolutely.
And that kind of was the main takeaway with all that.
Sam, honestly, I've got goosebumps listening to you. That was so profound, and the relationship you described with your late father just sounds beautiful, and really, really, really appreciate you sharing that with us, because you really didn't have to, and
that's right.
Appreciate it can't have been easy. And it makes me think I've got to, after this, definitely, like, I spoke to my dad yesterday, but give him a call and cherish that relationship, because like you said, these things aren't a given, and gosh, I can only imagine, or even I can't really even begin to imagine what that must have been like at such a young age, but I'm sure he'd be very proud of the person you are today and the decisions you've made and the impact you're having. So
thanks, man.
Something beautiful, I'm sure, has come from it.
Cheers.
Absolutely.
Thanks, mate. Yeah, thank you.
And I guess kind of moving on from that, the change in your career as well, did that situation with your late father kind of have an impact on your career and music, and, you know, what you sang about and your kind of songwriting inspiration and things like that?
In terms of songs, like there's been songs I've written, I don't know if anything's ever gone out that I'd explicitly spoken about that, but that kind of speaks to the situation I was in, because I would have loved to release a song like that.
Yeah.
But they only want pop bangers.
Yeah.
Someone moaning about their dad dying ain't getting
Yeah.
played on Radio 1. You know what I mean?
Right, okay.
So it's like, you know, I couldn't really express that at the time. Where I'm at now, far more independent. I've got one song in particular on the piano that I can't wait to release, and it's all about him.
Amazing.
So there's a lot of, obviously, a wealth of kind of emotional stuff you can tie into, dig into as a songwriter. But yeah, I think like I remember when you sent through that email, like biggest challenges or whatever, the dad thing was definitely it. The second one I wrote down was like the thing that happened a couple of years ago with the record label and having to realign what I wanted to do. That's been, and still is, really hard. But in answer to your question about how dad kind of has a part of that, it's again what I was saying before. It's like you kind of feel like you've got someone on your shoulder just nudging you along, and you don't want to give up for them, kind of thing. So
absolutely.
there's a lot of kind of a well of strength that you can you know, take from that.
Again, thank you for kind of providing us with that reflection. I'm just mindful of time. Giving back, are there any things you do in terms of mentoring or in your personal life to give back to the next generation? From the experiences you've had, it sounds like you've got a lot to offer.
Yeah, I do this thing called the Ivors Youth Council. So I'm on the Youth Council. So the Ivors are an amazing organisation that they're mainly known for the Ivor Novello Awards, which is like the creme de la creme of awards that you could win as a songwriter. I'd love to win one day. You know, it's just something that everyone wants to go after. But they've also got the Ivors Academy, which are basically a lot of musicians and creatives that love music, that campaign for musicians' rights. You know, diversity within the industry. Basically everything that's wrong with the industry, we help to try and rally support to make right. And they've recently, in the last couple of years, set up a youth sector of it, because naturally, luckily, they had the self-awareness to realise, we've had the same people here for 30, 40 years. Let's bring in some young blood. Yeah. And I applied for that, and now I'm on the youth council. So.
And how does someone get involved in that, or, you know, if they want some support from the council, how would they go about getting in touch?
So you basically ivorsacademy.com, and then you'll find the youth council somewhere on there, or just Ivors Academy Youth Council. If that's the kind of thing you want to be involved with, you can sign up for a membership. I think you pay 50 quid or something for the year, or however many years. You get discounts on certain like studios in London or whatever, or you get discounts at music shops, and there's perks to joining up. And then at that point you can have access to talking to me or whoever it is. Obviously talk to me regardless, just hit me up, but there's just like a wealth of support and a kind of community there, which is really valuable for not only young artists wherever you're at in your journey. The Ivors are a great kind of organisation to help you along. So
nice, brilliant. And so, well, look, just wrapping up, at the end of the show we like to ask a couple of fun questions. What would be the best piece of advice? Let me start again. What would be the biggest life lesson you've learnt that you'd give to the 18-year-old version of yourself?
Listen to your gut, and make sure what you're releasing is something you're always going to be happy with your name being attributed to it. If you're a singer-songwriter, that's like quite niche, I guess, to singer-songwriters, maybe not to musicians in general, but definitely make sure you're always true to yourself. It's the biggest cliche in the book with art, but man, it goes a long way.
Yeah. Okay.
And finally, any books you would recommend that you've read which have had quite a good like impact on you, or any podcasts that you would recommend that our listeners listen to rather?
Reading podcasts. I love listening to Elizabeth Day's How to Fail. She's great. Roughly a similar format to what you guys are working with. She really brings on really entertaining and kind of valuable guests that can help show you an insight into their world and their profession and how they went through adversity to get where they are. So that's really good. There's another podcast called S-Town, which is like completely different vibe. It's almost something that you just have to dive into, but it's an amazing true story about this guy living in the south of America, and he's a clock maker, and basically the shocking, amazing life that he leads. Honestly, like,
sounds entertaining.
Both of you should tune into that. It's so
Awesome.
It's wild what happens in that. But books, I had a kind of longer list, but bringing it down to 2. I'm mainly a fan of fiction, to be fair, but I think it's worth saying, like, Sapiens is a great one for a factual read. I think it's just great to have a base kind of understanding of your kind of longer history, and it's done in a really interesting way. Like, it's not kind of snooze material.
Yeah.
Maybe at points it dips because it's a long book, but it's really well put together. Great book. Fiction, I could say a million things. I'm a big fan of Hemingway and all sorts of novelists, but Catcher in the Rye, as a young person reading a book, it's like, it's like a manual for kind of adolescence, really, that book. And it's a big coming of age one. I think it's like one of the OGs. J.D. Salinger, Catcher in the Rye, read it. It's really good.
Amazing.
Thank you.
Sam, where can people find you?
So
The plug segment.
The plugs. You can find me at This Is Cartwright pretty much anywhere.
Instagram and Twitter.
Instagram, Facebook. Okay. I think Twitter is actually at I am Cartwright, but basically put Cartwright in.
It will be in the show notes.
Yeah, we'll put it in the show notes.
So This Is Cartwright is the main one. But you can find me there. If you want to listen to the old stuff, Sam Johnson on Spotify or any of those kind of streaming services. Only listen to Peter Pan.
My favourite song, by the way, that you've released.
Do you still get a cut though?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, so listen away.
Listen away, guys.
There's money in his pocket.
Listen. And, jokes aside, your music is incredible. I'm a big fan.
Cheers, man.
I will be going to a lot more gigs and listening to your new releases as well as your old releases.
Yeah.
So do tune in. Thanks, Sam. Thank you so much for coming on, man. It's been an incredible conversation. You've been really honest, insightful, articulate. I've learned a lot more about you, and I think you're an incredible guy and an incredible musician. Alex, any closing words from yourself?
No, just echoing Nikki's. It's been a real pleasure getting to know you a bit better, and I'm sure I hope the relationship continues, and then we can have a beer sometime, because it's been really cool.
Yeah,
nice one.
Amazing. And guys, thank you for listening. As always, please follow, subscribe, like, comment, all of that good stuff. This has been the Hard Work Beats Talent podcast, and we'll catch you on the next one.